reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to the crowds, "This is how it is with the kingdom of God. It is as if a man were to scatter seed on the land and would sleep and rise night and day, and through it all, the seed would sprout and grow. He knows not how. Of its own accord, the land yields fruit, first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. And when the grain is ripe, he wields the sickle at once, for the harvest has come." He said, "To what shall we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable can we use for it? It's like a mustard seed, that when it is sown in the ground is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. But once it is sown, it springs up and becomes the largest of plants, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the sky can dwell in its shade." With many such parables, Jesus spoke to them as they were able to understand it. Without parables, he did not speak to them, but to his own disciples he explained everything in private. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Even though blacks in the United States gained their emancipation in 1864, it was not until 1964 that an act was passed giving them the civil rights, the same civil rights as whites had. But in between, they were the victims of terrible discrimination, especially in some of the southern states. To take an example, Montgomery, Alabama, 1955, although 70% of the passengers using the city bus lines were black, 70%, they were treated much as inferiors. The first seats on all the buses were kept for whites. And even if they were empty and the rear ones crowded, blacks would have to stand in the back in case some more whites might get on the bus. And if the front seats were taken and more whites got on the bus, black people seated in the rear were forced to get up and give them their seats. Blacks had to pay their fares in the front of the bus, get off, and walk to the rear door to board again. Sometimes the bus would drive off without them, even though they had paid their fares. This would happen to elderly people, even to pregnant women on occasion, and was a great joke among the drivers, all of whom were white. But a single incident brought this whole shabby business to an end. On December 1st, 1955, a 42-year-old woman boarded a bus to go home after a long day working and shopping. She found a seat at the start of the black section. And at the next stop, some whites got on, and the driver ordered her to get up and give her seat to a white man. This meant that she would have to stand all the way home. Ms. Parks said later that she was not in a revolutionary state of mind, and she had not planned to act as she did. "I was just plain tired and my feet hurt," she said. So she sat there, and she refused to get up. The driver called the police. Miss Parks was arrested and put in jail, although later she was released on bail. But what she had done was like a spark in a forest that hasn't seen rain in a whole year. Word spread quickly. The blacks suddenly saw the whole system was grossly unfair and decided to do something about it. A meeting was called, and Martin Luther King was asked to address it. The outcome was that they made one basic demand: that passengers be seated on a first-come, first-served basis. And to achieve this end, a boycott of buses was planned to begin on December 4th. But would the people support it? They did. People walked to work. Those who had cars ferried fellow workers to their jobs. It was an extraordinary scene. Everywhere, the sidewalks were crammed with people walking to work, and the buses were empty, except for the whites. The boycott dragged on all winter and through the spring and the summer of 1956. Meanwhile, the leaders of the movement were all arrested. Martin Luther King's home was bombed. The people dreaded facing a second winter by having to walk to work. But they were spared that hardship. For on November 13th, the Supreme Court of the United States declared that Alabama's segregation laws were unconstitutional. Victory was achieved. An unjust situation was put right because of one particular day, on one particular day, one woman decided to act. It all began with one small act. As the proverb says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And Miss Parks herself had no idea what she was starting on that fateful day in 1955. In today's gospel, Jesus speaks of the kingdom in similar terms. He says that it is like a mustard seed which a man plants in his garden. And even though it's tiny, given time, it grows into a large shrub in whose branches the birds of the air will find food and shelter. What is Jesus teaching us? Maybe it could be put like this: how God depends on us and how we depend on God. If we want to change something in our own lives or our own world, the world around us, small as it might be, we must start somewhere. That start will necessarily be very small and may appear to be totally insignificant and useless in the circumstances. But once we take that first step in what we believe to be a just cause, we must trust that God will help us go forward as surely as God makes the seed grow once we've taken the trouble to plant it. We must go forward, even though we do not know where it will lead us. We must persevere in spite of delays and obstacles. We must trust God. This is a valuable and consoling lesson if we want God to reign in our lives. lives. If there is some area in my life or your life where God does not reign, when am I going to take the first step to change this situation? If there is some unjust situation in the world around me, then maybe I can be the one to take the first step to correct it. Then others will follow. And God will help us see it through. For God's kingdom to come, a kingdom of justice and love and peace and end to racism, each of us has a part to play. But it is God who gives the increase. As individuals, we may feel we haven't much to contribute. And yet to plant even one seed of truth and justice and peace is a worthwhile thing. And we can leave it to God to bring forth the harvest, and perhaps others to reap it. Jesus, remember, began his great work by calling a handful of fishermen. And we are an extension of them. I love the quote from Mother Teresa. We can do no great things, only small things with great love. We can do no great things, only small things with great love.